Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hi, welcome to Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan, and I'm Susan.
And I'm Lisa. Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about the myth of work-life balance.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this show.
And, you know, as Lisa and I chatted about what would this show look like and, you know, what would we be talking about, it really occurred to us that work-life balance is a myth.
Well, you know, when you think about it, we talk about work-life balance as if they're two separate things, like work isn't a part of life. Yeah. To me, it's more like life balance.
I think work-life balance is kind of a holdover from when women first started getting into the workforce, and maybe from the 70s and the 80s when we were just starting to make our inroads into the workforce. But now, I mean, we're way past that.
Yeah, and I think it's the myth part of it is that, you know, there's this perspective that it should be some 50-50 or 25%, 25%, 25%, you know, like in our lives, and it just doesn't make any sense.
It's way too messy.
Yeah.
You know, for me, work-life balance is what can I put up with feeling the most guilty about?
I understand.
And you know, I don't have children of my own. I do have a stepson who's 12, but that's pretty recent. Four years ago, I married a man with a child. But, you know, I watched my sister, my one sister who raised 2 kids as a single mom and worked full time and then decided, you know, most of the way through her 30s to go back to school and take on a whole new career and actually like really switch her careers.
That's
and,
courageous.
you know, I said, how did you do it? How did you do it? She would set the alarm at 3 a.m. And she would get up at 3 a.m. and do her prep for her course.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, and I think the other part of the myth is that there's one right way to do it. You know, I think one of the other holdovers from our, you know, from the past is that before women were in the workforce, as much as we are now, there was, you know, you had your house perfect, you had your, you know, everything perfect. And how do you do that when, you know, something's got to give? But I think those old ways of thinking still are pervasive, and that's, I think, one of the things that leads to this myth.
There's a women's magazine that I like. You know, it's like, I don't even remember the name of it, but it's one of the old classic women's magazines. They have a column in there, and it's about home decorating, and they have this one section that says, good. And if you want to do something good, you do it this particular way. Then they have the alternative, which is good enough, which is what I ascribe to.
I like
so
that.
Like good and you know, good enough.
That's
you know,
right.
Just stick the dirty socks under the bed, you know, or under the couch when the guests are coming, and clean it up later.
That's right. Well, I think it's a good time to bring our guests on to join our conversation. So we are very, very privileged to have 2 terrific guests today. First, we have with us Anne Daley, who is with CM Fox. She's a real estate agent. We'll have her tell us a little bit about that in a moment. And then we also have with us Denise Gonick from MVP. And I forgot your title, so I'll have you say that. So welcome. Thank you for being with us on Real Conversations. So Denise, actually, we're just going to start with you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your title?
Sure.
And what it is you're balancing.
Okay. Well, the title is Executive Vice President for Administration. So balancing a lot there.
Yeah.
And balancing a lot at home. I'm married and have 2 daughters who are ages 12 and 8.
Wow.
So I suppose, you know, the balancing act is how to do right by everyone and still have something left for me.
Yeah. And you have some community involvement too, yes?
Yep. Also on a local board, on the Schenectady Museum board, as well as involved in my kids' school
Yeah.
as much as possible.
That's great. We're going to come back to that in just a second. And tell us a little bit about you and what
Sure.
you're trying to balance.
Absolutely. I am an associate broker, as you said, with CM Fox Real Estate, which is a boutique firm in the area. And I, too, am married, and I have 3 children. My children are older now. I have two that have just graduated from college and one that's still in college. So that portion of my running around with all the after-school activities is kind of lessened a little on my load, but there's a lot of other pressures that come into play. And knowing my children were going to be at this phase in their life, I got involved in a lot of volunteer work. So it's balancing, as you say, or trying to keep the balance between work, family obligations. I travel a lot for my family, and some community service work as well.
So, Anne, did you intentionally kind of delay taking on some additional things while your children were younger? And then since they've gotten
did.
older and they're more independent, you can now free
I
yourself
did.
up for other things?
I did. Actually, my family, my husband and I made the decision when our children were very young to forego a lot of extras, and I was able to stay home with my children for the first few years of their lives, which was great for that part of me, balancing that portion. You know, when you sacrifice what you need to when you make that decision as a mother.
You mean forego the extras in terms of your finances so that you didn't have to work outside the home?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, maybe we didn't move up to that next house right away, and you know, those are decisions that everyone makes for themselves. It's a very personal decision. But then once my children were at an age where I decided that I was going to go out and go back into the working world, I got back in, and you know, then you do take on that balance of running around to all their activities, as you said. And as they started to get older and I started feeling I wasn't quite as needed, that's when I decided to get involved with doing a little bit of volunteer work and community service work.
You know what's interesting for me about both your jobs is that they're not 9 to 5.
No.
You know, rarely are jobs 9 to 5 anymore. But you know, your job as you know, weekends, evenings, you're showing houses. You have a lot of demands on you. You know, as a executive vice president, let's face facts. You know, your day starts way before 9 and you know doesn't end. I mean, how did that play into, or how does that play into your ability to sort of balance things out?
You know, I don't think that you can look at things rigidly. You know, you have to be willing to be flexible. And it's interesting because just listening to your experience about, you know, making the choice, my experience was the opposite, but by default. So I became a vice president 2 months before I gave birth to my first child. I didn't plan it that way, but that's where the opportunity happened to be there, and so we went with it. So I think almost from the get-go, it was sort of a little bit of not quite knowing what I had gotten myself into in either case, as a mother or at work, and just, you know, rebalancing all the time. Yeah, I think that's
You kind of have to figure it out as you go
as you
along.
go, or maybe doing something that works for a while and then it's not working anymore, and so you have to make an adjustment.
Right.
That reminds me of a motivational speaker who I recently heard do a keynote at a conference, and he just authored a book called Out of Balance on Purpose. And you know what he says in his book is that if you stay out of balance on purpose, therein lies the growth opportunity and the opportunity to really bring your life to the next level, regardless of what it is, you know, what your vision is for the next level of your life. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. He also delivered the keynote on a unicycle juggling.
There you go. He was talking about balance.
Yeah, exactly, which I thought was brilliant. But
Great marketing strategy.
great marketing strategy, but I thought it was a very interesting take. And I have found in my life that the more I load onto it, the more I learn about myself and about the team that I have around me.
Right. And I think that's part of it too. You have to know what you can delegate out. I mean, I'm in a job that it's very much personal, customer service oriented. I need to be at my client's beck and call, but you also have to establish that rapport with those people that you're working with, whether it's in my kind of job or your kind of job, that they realize, they like you enough as a person that you have another life too.
Yeah,
It's
and
not strictly about your job.
I think
right.
also in your personal life, I think, for me, I've had to establish a team in my personal
Right.
life to help me handle the various things that I have in my life, even love, pleasure, and enjoyment. I mean, I have a team for that.
Right.
I think that's a good point. We've all heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, except in our country, right? We all have this sort of nuclear family. I think it's more and more shifting, but this concept of you have to do it alone, like this Lone Ranger sort of perspective, or even you and your husband or significant other, that there's this sort of wall around, and I think that's critical, is to be able to make requests, have a team,
Sure.
Have people who can support you, and I know for both of you, when we talked about this prior to the show, you mentioned having people in your life that you could really rely on.
Right.
Can you say something about that?
Extended family, I think, for some people, for me personally, has been very important. And a network of friends that you can share those same duties with. I know for me, I had friends that had children the same age, so if I needed to get something work-wise done and I didn't have coverage from my husband, then I was able to rely on my friends, and then vice versa, I would do that for them as well. So I think it's kind of the give and take of figuring out who your support people are. And
Yeah, and I think in my case, I had similar experiences, but also, definitely an understanding, with my husband about, why certain pressures were there, and his commitment, as we saw sort of the trajectory that I was on, to be supportive. I
definitely.
couldn't, it's just not possible on your own. And I would say now, as my girls are growing, they have a certain understanding of it that maybe they couldn't have had when they were very little, and they contribute in their own ways, in their own supportive ways, whether it's around the house or even just asking, how was your day today?
Yeah.
Which is nice.
It just occurred to me as we talk about work-life balance, and I already sort of said this at the beginning of the show, but we think about it as family and work. Right, but there's so much more. You mentioned
Right.
a social network. You talk about volunteering. You talk about your own self, like
Right.
having time for yourself to read a book or do something you enjoy. I think all of those things need to be a part of the conversation, don't you?
absolutely.
Well, what about an elderly parent? I have an elderly mother who lives alone, and she does come up. She lives in Florida. She comes up for the summer, and I'm committed to
Right.
seeing her several times a week when she's up here in the summer. She stays with my sisters, and they're saints. They open their home to her and everything, but I just make it a point. So I have other things that I don't do.
Right.
And
I think that's part of that same family commitment, whether it's to children, whether it's to, as you say, an older parent or
because I can't
relative.
afford to feel guilty about not seeing her.
Yeah, there's
That's
that
something
guilt.
I'm not willing to take on for myself.
Right.
And it's interesting, Denise, that you use the word trajectory, because when Lisa and I were talking about how the show would be, that was a word that I used because I recently started seeing that word a lot in the course that I'm taking. And when you think about a trajectory, you think about shifting priorities along the way. It kind of moves not on a clear pattern, but you have to be willing to adjust as unanticipated things arise. And I think that you need to enroll your team, be they work, be they family, friends, whatever, in the shifting priorities that trajectory will impose on you. And, at any given day, like it's the summer, my mom's here, that's going to be my priority.
Right.
Now I'm in school's going to be my priority, and so on and so forth.
So to not be so rigid, I think you're right, that we do have different times that certain things are more important than others, and realizing that. And
It's like the next iteration of flex time.
Yeah.
yes.
And I think, part of the key to that is when it's not seasonal, like what you've experienced, is being able to take the time to think through what you need, because sometimes it's not that obvious.
That's such a good point.
And that's the hard part, you know, to say, okay, because it's first, I think, especially for a lot of women, the difficulty was even asking for help.
Exactly.
You mean your husband isn't a mind reader?
It's good, but you know, so, but to say, okay, what do I even ask for? You know, because you can get, I know for me, I can get so overwhelmed where I don't know what to ask for, and that's when I know, okay,
And if you're a bit of a
it's too
perfectionist,
much.
sometimes you have to let go of the fact that you want
Right.
it done your way.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah.
part of it, definitely.
That's
Whether
good
it's
enough.
with
Back to the good enough policy.
Because when you have a pressure, a high-powered job, you're used to being directive and
Yes.
being the
Right.
boss and having to be able to make quick decisions and tell people what to do. And sometimes you just can't do that.
Right, you have to, good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting because all this keeps coming back to a couple things. One is flexibility. One is being willing to ask for help and being willing to think about what it is you might need. I mean, I think sometimes we're very reactionary and we don't take that time to just sort of reflect on what's going to make this situation work. You know, we kind of are trying to put out fires or, you know, keep everybody happy. And I think that tends to really throw us off balance, because if we're not happy first, how can we help other people to find joy and satisfaction in their life?
I agree.
Don't you think?
Well,
Yeah.
you know, a couple of things that we've covered on the show in the past is like nutrition and wellness, and
Right.
I think it kind of goes to a wellness thing. And one thing we've talked about is turning everything off and just sitting for 10 minutes. And I find if I just sit for 10 minutes, what I really want or what I really need is going to show itself to me, as I've seen it happen time and time. And I'll actually put the timer on. And
I do
I
that
will
too.
sit, because otherwise I'm like, is it 10 minutes? Because I got something
been
else
11
to do.
minutes?
Yeah. I got something else
Shut
to
off
do.
your phone,
But you know,
turn everything
I will
off.
shut the
Yes.
door and I will put on the timer so then I don't have to think about if it's the 10 minutes yet. And
just breathe.
And just breathe. And what's important will, I know it might sound a little mystical, it does reveal itself most times.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it is important to set the time for it, because it's not going to happen by itself.
That's right.
And I think that life is just getting more and
Well,
more
I think
chaotic.
that's at the
so
scheduling
to
and your
get to
time
that quiet
management.
time, it's not going to be like I had a habit for a long time of thinking, okay, when I just get done with this, then I'll be able to. But the thises keep piling up, and you sort of realize at some point you're never going to be done with all of
Yes.
them. But you're going to have to stop anyway, because
yeah,
you have
it's
to keep-
never all going to be done.
That's right.
Except
And
when,
accept that,
when you're
but-
in the grave.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
then what
And
good
then
is
they'll
that?
be sad
right.
that
Yeah.
you didn't do the things that you said you wanted to do for yourself or
Yeah.
for your friends
Well,
and family.
I forget I forget who I was talking to. One of you before the show, we were talking about how on the airplane they say, put your own oxygen mask on
Yeah, you
first.
and
If
I
you're-
discussed
when you're
that,
traveling
yes.
with children,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They say put your own oxygen mask on, and I think that's really profound when you think about it. You know, if we aren't taking care of ourselves, if we're not giving ourselves oxygen, we're going to be of no use to
Right.
anyone else. So taking that 10 minutes or taking that time to make sure that you know,
Yeah,
and
schedule your
partner,
doctor's
too.
appointments. Think about what you need to do to unwind. Do your exercising. Do whatever those things that you need. Obviously, it can't take much of your day, but you do it, and
Well,
then all your other pieces, hopefully, you can get to fall into place.
What about that stain on the rug? You know, like for me, I'll go up and down my stairs and there's a stain on the rug. And every time I look at it, it'll bother me, it'll annoy me. But I think immediately, I don't have the time to clean it. I don't have it. But, you know, every time I go up and down the stairs, it's annoying me that it's there.
I have that same stain.
Yeah, you know, but I mean,
I don't have a carpet on my. I don't have a carpet on my
I'm like,
stairs. So.
I'm going to have to schedule in the time to clean that
Yeah.
stain. But you know what? The best favor I can do for myself is to just drop everything and clean
And
the
do
thing.
it so it stops
You know what I
bothering
did?
you.
So it
Sometimes
stops
that's
bothering
true.
me.
You know what I did is I scheduled odd job times once a month.
Good for you.
I scheduled a time once a month where I do just things that have been piling up. We
See,
did
I
at our
wouldn't
house.
remember what
To make
they
the
are.
list. You
I
have to
make a
the
list, though.
You know,
I
I
make
have
a
to
list.
schedule making the list. That would have to.
You carry a piece of paper around. You just write it down.
I would lose
But
the piece of paper.
We were in our house almost 8 years before the number, our address, the brass number we bought the day we closed. 8 years, but it's on the house now, because every time I opened the damn drawer,
all that matters.
number was in there. So I mean, but I realized that there were a lot of things like that, and by having an odd job day, like just a couple of hours on a weekend or whatever.
That's a really good idea.
I mean, I know it's just like, it seems like a silly thing, but it's even those things, those little annoyances. Sometimes we have to schedule them.
Because you pay a price for those little annoyances.
Yes, you do.
Well, if they're eating at you every time you pull in the driveway
They're
and you don't see the
undermining my
number there.
wellness.
Right.
Well, and that really gets to the life part of the work-life
Yeah.
balance, right? And to me, this is really the key to the wellness thing too, because I used to think too big, I think, with respect to trying to do the balance thing. And by that I mean, like, okay, I have to schedule exercise classes, and I have to be committed and to make sure that I was going to have a certain number of hours doing a certain thing. And then that became another guilt thing
Right.
and another overwhelming
Yeah.
thing. And you realize that it's really much smaller. It's, the 10 minutes to think, or the 5
Or
minutes
fit in the
to
20
schedule.
minutes on the treadmill if that's all you can
Right.
fit in. Just do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That it's better to do that than to do nothing.
Right.
And the
So-
20 minutes reading your child a book. Or,
Right.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
That counts.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
that it
Yeah.
all counts. It doesn't have to
Right.
be, this big grandiose thing.
Right.
It can really be those things. I think that's really
And everybody
really good
has
point.
their own priorities as to what's the most important to them, obviously.
And I think it needs to shift. Again,
Yeah.
going to my mother, I actually spent a Sunday afternoon just baking cookies with her.
Right.
Right.
Now, when you work a lot, we all know every minute of the weekend is precious, right?
Right.
So I'm like, you know what? It's my mother. This is what I'm doing.
Right. And she got enjoyment out of it and spending
We
that
both
time.
did.
Yeah.
Sure.
And everything just quieted right down.
One of the
It's
things
nice.
you had mentioned to me when we were talking about the show was about being willing to be present to whatever it is you're doing. And I think sometimes that's where that guilt comes in. It's like we're working on this project for work. I own my own business, so there is no 9 to 5.
24/7.
When do you stop?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So,
Never.
so like if I have a big proposal due and I'm working late at night, I have to be willing to focus on that and not sit there and think, oh, my husband's doing this or he's not doing that, or, whatever, I'm not taking care of my mom right now. But to be able to be present to what you're doing. And then when I shut work off and go, do some social thing or, just enjoy some time for myself, I can't be then going, oh, I should be working on that proposal, I should be working
It's
on
a lot
this
easier
stuff.
said than done, though.
Yeah, but I think-
especially if you're, as you say, you're in your own business. My business, basically, I'm an independent
Yeah,
contractor.
exactly.
That's your bread and butter is those people that are calling you, and you are connected all the time, and you want to meet those needs. But you're right, you do have to at some point say, okay, I need to just take this time and do what I need to do to be with my mom or to be with my husband or my children.
I think you get more bang for your buck when you do it the way that Lisa's suggesting, because I remember a couple of years ago when it first dawned on me, that this was maybe something I should be doing. I felt like, like any time that I would schedule, and I was very, very busy that particular year. I was back in school and working full time and taking a development course in the city. It was a crazy time for me. But if I was able to grab an hour here or a couple hours there for a movie or something, I would be thinking about, during that movie, rather than enjoying that movie, I'd be thinking about everything else. Part of this personal development course I took had me see what I was doing and to represence myself. And then when I was able to do that, I realized, now I'm actually having fun. I wasn't having fun before because even when I was having fun, I was working.
Or worrying
So
about
now I'm
everything.
like, oh, I can take 2 hours and actually have fun and feel refreshed and reinvigorated to go back and do my work and do it well.
I think one of the keys to that is recognizing that the voice in your head isn't telling you the truth. We
Ooh,
all
I like
have this
that.
voice in our head, right? And a lot of times we don't talk about this. Well, I call it a narrator because a lot of the work that I do has to do with our internal communication. And
Right.
and we listen to this voice in our head like it's telling us the truth, but in reality, it's just telling one possible.
Just that guilt coming
Yeah,
again.
it's your mother's 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 mother that passed it down or whatever. And when you
You
start
must be Irish Catholic, too.
French Catholic. We could do a show on that. But it's one of those things where you start to and I happen to take the same self-development program. That's how we met many, many years ago. But it's like getting really aware of that voice in your head is not the truth. That it's not telling you the only way. You know,
Right.
that's the thing that I think is really important for all of us to start to recognize, is it's just one possible way of viewing it.
Right.
And
You know, I read something that's sort of along those lines pretty recently that suggested you then go the next step and ask the people around you what they need from you.
Instead of you
How,
assuming. yeah.
right?
Oh,
you
wow,
know,
that's
how
good.
can
Imagine.
I really support you? And I know you first reading, you're like, ooh, do I really want to ask that? But if you think about it, that's one way to get right to it, because we have these very high expectations
Yes.
of ourselves that could be coming from that voice, which could be coming from a whole different place, and that sometimes, you know, what the people around us want from us is our attention, right? It's just like, well, we want you to be enjoying this moment. We do want you to be present, to use your words. And it's the same thing, you know, even at work too.
Right.
They'll say, you know, we want you to be. Most people want your attention, you know, when they're
yeah.
with you.
That's
Yeah.
right.
You know?
That's, I mean,
God
there's so much.
forbid, you know?
Yeah.
That's so much statistics that show that people just want to be heard.
Right.
And
And communication. I think
And-
communication
and
is,
you-
like you
I-
say,
Yeah.
asking, you'll get what you ask for, hopefully,
Right.
and asking what they need and being able to fulfill that need. But it's all communication, definitely.
Yeah.
And not building it up in our heads about everything.
and
Sorry.
assume
Sorry.
Here I'm trying to say, if you just listen, and here I am not listening to you, but what else is new? No, I was going to say, if you can do that, make that change to really start listening to the people in your life, first of all, it doesn't cost you anything
That's
to
right.
do that. And it's going to improve your relationships so much. I mean, when I can get myself to do it, which is not that often, it's like magic, really.
Well, it
is.
requires a lot of focus.
It does.
But it pays off.
And then if
You
you're a
have to
person
remind
who's used to
yourself to do it,
telling
yes.
people what to do, it's
Yeah.
hard.
Well, I think the electronic devices, you know,
Yes.
universal symbol for the BlackBerry
Yeah.
and all that, it's very hard because
Constant
you're
connection.
constant connection, but disconnection, right? Because you're doing two different things at once.
Right, you're
so you're not really fully paying attention to either of them.
We're
It's like
trying
the-
to do work-life balance.
Well, and it's interesting because you know, when I see professionals with BlackBerries and they could check their emails or iPhones or whatever the heck they have, it's all there's no longer boundaries around things the way there used to be. And I'm not saying that there should be, because I think flexibility is critical, but there, you know, it used to be you worked from at this time to this time, but now it's like more and more and more the time shifts, you know, because you're at 7 o'clock at night, you know, dinner's over and you're checking your email, you know, or, you know, and all of that I think is not conscious, and that's what concerns me about it. I don't want to make it right or wrong, but it's like this unconscious what's the word, like encroachment into your life, you know, when it's a conscious decision, you know, I'm going to work till 7 o'clock, or after dinner, I'm going to work for this amount of time, honey. So then you could count on me after that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
those
Yes.
kinds of conscious
I
things.
think that's a way of being that you have to be in today's economy and in today's labor market in order to be successful. Not that that's an excuse. I think there's a lot of problems with that, but I think it's...
But it's definitely necessary.
It's
in my
necessary.
industry, for
Of
sure.
course.
For sure. And actually, it does make it maybe my schedule more flexible, because I do have those technological gadgets that are allowing me to be in two places at one time.
Yeah, I think that just brings the point. It's not like there's one right way to do it. I
Right.
think you have to find what's right
The balance.
for you. The balance, yeah.
Right.
And you have to find out what works for you, because, you know, I just had a situation over this past weekend where my husband had a 3-day weekend, and I had a lot of work to do because I have a book coming out, I have all this stuff going on. And one of the things that made all the difference in the world was just saying, honey, I'm going to work till noon each one of these days, and then from that time on, I'm not going to work. I'm going to totally be with you. We'll just go do stuff. And it made all the difference in the world, because he knew that until noon he was free. He could do what he wanted. He knew from noon on I was available, and we had the most amazing weekend. I got a bunch of stuff done. But, you know, it was asking for what I wanted, being willing to make that request, but also his willingness to be
scheduling your
flexible.
You made a conscious decision ahead of
Exactly.
time instead of getting swept up in your work and letting it go on all day. So that
Exactly.
helps you recalibrate
Right, which
too.
we all can do.
Yeah.
There's
And you
always-
considered his needs, too.
Yeah, I like to do that from time to time. It isn't all about me.
It does help pay the bills, right?
Yeah, there's that too. Well, we only have a couple more minutes for the before the show
Who
is
would've
over.
thunk it?
I know, flies, right? Is there anything you'd like to express to our viewers that, you know, from something maybe you've learned, or something you want to reiterate from what we talked about today? That if you was something you could I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's okay. I mean, I think the biggest thing is to be kind to yourself, and to allow for the fact that everybody has different needs. They will change over time, and that it's okay to think small, and that you might get more traction out of thinking
I like
small.
that.
That's
very
great.
good.
That's really good.
That's great.
How about for you?
I agree too, and I think for me it boils down to time management, which I don't say that I'm good at. And I read something recently that said, no is a complete sentence, and I love that. I have
I
a
like
hard
that
time
too.
saying no, whether it's to work or to volunteering or to whatever. I have a hard time saying no, so I think that that's important for us to remember too, that we don't have to try to take everything on.
Yeah.
And you do give yourself that time.
Someone said to me once that you can't manage time, you can manage tasks. And that made a
That's
huge
great.
difference because you can't manage time. It's going on, it's 24 hours a day, we all get the same amount, but you can manage tasks. And that's always been a really helpful thought.
That'll be the next show, time management, myth or
We'll have a whole new show. Okay, well, our time is up. We thank you so much for watching Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan. I'm Lisa,
I'm Susan.
and we'll see you again soon.